I'm Rachel Humphrey with It's Personal Stories, a hospitality podcast. We are dedicated to empowering personal success within the hospitality industry, and I'm very excited to be joined today, a long time in the making, with Nelson Knight with Apple Hospitality. Nelson, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I am going to jump right in because I know that we will end up being short on time with lots of things I want to cover with you, but I want to start with your particular path to leadership. One of the things I love so much about the industry is that you can really carve any path you want. You and I may have very different ways of getting to leadership within the hospitality industry, but they are each unique to us. So tell us a little bit about your path to get to where you are today, and if you think there were any pivotal moments maybe that shaped that journey for you.
Absolutely. Rachel, I grew up in real estate, whether it was on the personal side with my family and their ranching expertise, or on the commercial side through apartment communities. My father had started a company, and that afforded some opportunities that I recognized were probably unique to my situation. But I had the opportunity at a pretty early age to work as a leasing agent while I was in high school at one of our local communities here in the broader Richmond, Virginia area. It was an unbelievable experience. So high schooler, would go to high school, had my soccer practices, and then would go to this apartment community and was a leasing agent and got to work alongside some very amazing individuals. It really showed me the importance of hard work, of customer acquisition, of being relatable to others. And it really started my foundation. From there, I had other opportunities to work in corporate roles around a call center that found and identified potential candidates or potential tenants for our apartment communities. This was pre-internet era, and we would run an ad in an apartment finder, which was a regional-based public.
I remember that.
And we would source those leads and plug them into our own properties. I had a great time doing that. So that was really my high school career, somewhat unique. I wasn't a bagger at a grocery store or something else. But from there, I had the opportunity to then branch into our hospitality company. I did several internships over the last 20 years that I've worked full-time at Apple Hospitality. And I've had the opportunity to wear many different hats. I think that's what's so special about our industry. It's the ability to start somewhere and end up somewhere else. And my journey was unique. I started as an asset manager and had the opportunity to work alongside Chrissy Gathright, who I know you and I'm sure a number of your listening audience know very well. She was our chief operating officer at the time and a trusted board member today. But she essentially trained me, showed me the importance of a P&L, showed me how to consolidate and look at earnings from an asset management perspective. And I had a very core responsibility of our full service hotels, which was a small subset of our portfolio at the time, but a very important one. And it gave me an opportunity to really dive into the P&L and also travel some, which I enjoyed, and meet with property teams and learn and grow and find ways to better the performance. From there, I had the opportunity to then work in our capital markets alongside our chairman. And over my tenure, we raised over $7 billion in equity to invest in hospitality. And so while I didn't necessarily do a lot of that legwork, the foundation was there, and I was working alongside our chairman. I had the opportunity to see what it took to manage a relationship with a fundraiser, how to think through the capital stack of our acquisitions, what would qualify as an institutional investment, and how to communicate out to shareholders. So it was really unique and exciting experience. And from there, I had the opportunity to then venture into acquisitions. And I had the opportunity to work alongside Justin, who I think was on your podcast maybe a year or two ago. And I really had the opportunity to learn and grow under his leadership, learned the importance of markets, the importance of underwriting, taking the P&Ls that I'd learned from Chrissy and applying them through an underwriting and building out pro formas. And then from there, I also had the opportunity to focus on some of our development deals when we were non-public, when we were non-traded, but a public company. roughly a third of our acquisitions at any given point were these development deals. And we really didn't have anybody within our organization looking after those deals along the way. They take longer to develop. A construction cycle could take anywhere from 18 to 24 plus months. I had the opportunity to go on site, visit the properties, ensure that they're being delivered to the standards that we would want. And that was a great experience. All of these different roles and different hats ultimately have culminated into what I'm doing today, which is heading up our investment decisions here at Apple.
Wow, that's incredible. And so many great leadership lessons in there, whether it is learning from Chrissy and Justin and your chairman and others, getting to know so many different aspects of the business so that you're able to see a company very broadly. You talked about the relationships and other things we're going to touch on in a little bit. So I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things I want to talk about specifically, though, is you mentioned it being a family business, at least in its origin. And in the hospitality industry, there are certainly lots of businesses that do start or continue to be family businesses. And one of the things I hear from a lot of people is that there is a real balance between honoring the traditions, the culture, the leadership, the things that have created this very impactful organization, but then also doing new things, whether it be the internet being introduced,
Right.
new technologies or new culture, organization, things like that. Can you talk a little bit about leadership in a family business and maybe some of the lessons you've learned from that?
Absolutely. I think that's what makes the hospitality industry so interesting is that there are so many wonderful examples of family enterprise. It's probably one of the only major industries that has that. And it starts, you look at families like the Marriotts, who are third generation at this point and have built an unbelievable legacy, unbelievable company, to other owner operators and developers that are first, second, and third generation. When I think through that within my own personal story as a second generation hotelier, I think there's a lot of hopefully lessons that some of your listening audience can glean from what I've experienced over the last 20 years. But what I have found is a common theme in those that have started is very humble beginnings. My father grew up on a cattle ranch out west, was drafted in Vietnam, packed up his family, his wife, and my mother moved across the country to Virginia. And from there, after serving in the military, began building syndications on a commission basis in real estate and ultimately grew that over time into what we're doing today. And really, I think from my vantage point as a second generation, it's important to honor the traditions of the past. I recognize that I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I am. And so to give honor to the work that has preceded your efforts, and then look for ways to continue to grow and optimize them. And I think one example within our own industry or within our own hotel company is when we started in hospitality, we wanted to be 100% extended stay. It's very natural evolution from multifamily. So we thought we can buy these hotels at the time that were owned by Promise, the Home and Suites brand, which was ultimately acquired by Hilton, and some Residence Inns from Marriott. And that would be our platform. And we'd be an extended stay REIT. We quickly learned that our fundraising would outpace that and that we needed to pivot. And so still recognizing where we came from and the fact that we wanted to do business with great brand partners like Hilton and Marriott, we pivoted and began focusing not only on extended stay, but on select service as well.
Hey everybody,
and that was an opportunity for us to really learn and grow, and for Justin and myself to continue to push forward the mission and vision while staying true to the traditions that Apple was founded on originally. I think also some lessons learned along the way. One is that competence builds trust. You shouldn't rely on your name for a title. And for me, that was important. I early on decided that I wanted to go back to school and pursue a master's degree. I felt like that was an important component to my education. And I recognize that there's a lot of places that you can learn and grow, and on the job experience is important. But I felt like in order for me to gain the respect of those that I'd be working with, that it was an important step for me to take the extra time and effort to do that. And I've been blessed immensely from it. It gave me a foundation of financial analysis that I could begin to grow on. And that proficiency, that competence gains trust and support for those around you. I'd also say one other piece of advice, if you will, that I'd recommend is if you're working within a family business, to focus on having core and unique responsibilities. Justin and I work very well together, and we work well with our chairman, our father, but we each have very distinct and core responsibilities, and there is overlap, but not a lot. And there's an opportunity for us all to lead in our respective spheres.
I love the focus on honoring the humble beginnings, but really in saying competence builds trust. In this case, not relying on your name, your family name, to automatically feel like you are earning that trust for you. And part of that is in the self-care and wellness, which as an industry, we are also feeling a big evolution toward. Talk a little bit about your lessons from this year in this particular aspect of leadership.
So my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. every morning. It doesn't matter if I go to bed late the night before or early, it's going off at 5, and I get up. And consistency, I think, over the course of many years creates really healthy habits. And there's some days that, I can't put in a long workout. Maybe it's a 20-minute workout. And there's other days that I can give more, but that's special time in the morning that's allowed me to continue to focus on my health. And this past year, I took that period of time in the morning that I would normally have worked out and really focused on my physical therapy and on my returning to the way that I had felt pre-accident. And so that was a unique circumstance, but it gave me a time slot in the day before everything else got crazy, before my kids woke up and before I was rushing off to take them to school, and ultimately come into the office and focus on empathize with those that may have chronic illnesses or anything. But what I would say is modest changes to your life over time have a big impact and can add incremental health no matter where your starting point is.
I appreciate you sharing that and wishing you continued wellness and the self-care. I like the idea of little changes over time as well, too. I think it makes it much easier to stick with non-negotiables or with behaviors when they become part of your life rather than fads or quick fixes. One of the things that really excites me about this podcast is the tie back to curiosity that so many leaders share. And I think that it's probably a way I would describe myself, but never a word I would have used to describe myself until I started doing this podcast. You talked about learning different aspects of the business, but I'm curious if, there we go, I am curious, you would define yourself as a person who is curious. And then what's something you're curious about today, either inside or outside of hospitality?
Yeah. Oh, I love to be curious. I love people who are curious because I think it challenges the status quo that we do this because we've always done it this way. And I think it pushes a growth mindset on anybody who has curiosity at their core. To some extent, COVID really pushed that mindset on all of us, right? When the model shifted dramatically and occupancies dropped, it pushed us all to be curious and solving problems. And one way that we approached that within our own business was, how do we take and do more with less? And so we saw declining occupancies as an opportunistic time to ultimately renovate our properties. And maybe was counterintuitive at the time, where we were also having to support a lot more because there were fewer guests in our hotels. But there was a lot less disruption as well. We weren't taking rooms offline that otherwise would have had guests in them. And so we felt like it was an opportune time for us to renovate a number of our hotels, but really thought we needed to work on the scope. Historically, before COVID, we would go in and renovate to a brand standard that was pretty exhaustive of everything in the room and everything in the lobby. And we realized that there were many things that were less guest facing that could be kept. And with the help of the brand, we began to come up with a programmatic way to surgically approach these renovations and keep some items and replace others that would have higher guest impact, which ultimately allowed us to do more renovations during a period of time that was really tough and positioned ourselves to come out of COVID in a very unique way. I think in terms of one thing that I might be curious about in this year and coming years, you've seen a big AI boom, a big kind of technological advancements. I'm curious to see where that leads. I recognize that hospitality is our core business, and part of that is face-to-face interaction. But I'm very curious to see over the next 12 to 24 months where technology and hospitality might meet to help support a better customer experience while producing better margins for ownership groups like ourselves.
That's interesting. I love the tie of curiosity to challenging the status quo. Why do we do it this way? How can we do it differently? Really getting in and analyzing each individual piece as a form of curiosity. For each of us, leadership is something that we are probably not taught in school, other than a few who might have executive coaches or do a course here and there. Not a lot of continued formal education in leadership. But we do continue to evolve by what we experience during a year. I'm curious for you, as you look back on your periods of leadership, if you can identify what has gotten better over time in the style in which you lead, and is there anything that maybe has gotten a little more difficult over time?
I think for me, over time, over the last 20 plus years, for me, I think the ability to not only focus on the detail, recognizing a big part of my responsibility is acquisitions, dispositions, hotel renovations. So focusing on the detail, I think coming out of school and hitting the job early, things were a little bit more black and white when they read one way or another on paper. I've progressed through my career and experienced the great financial crisis and COVID and so many other things, and seen the cyclical nature of the hospitality industry and real estate abroad. I think it's allowed me to not only have the fundamentals of that very detail oriented look, but also be able to step back and look at the big picture. Does the asset that I'm looking at fit our model? Is it a strategic location for us long term? Are there fundamentals that I can't see on the paper, but I can see when I go to the property or the market, that I think will bolster our valuation for the deal and support shareholder growth over time? One example of that, more recently, we bought a portfolio of hotels in Salt Lake, the broader Salt Lake area. And this was a target market for us. We felt like we were underexposed in this area, but we felt like pricing was relatively full on two deals in particular. And we really weren't sure whether or not we'd be able to get to a place that made sense for both the seller and ourselves. But after visiting the two properties, seeing what had been done on site, seeing opportunities that we could find for additional revenue streams and other things, we ultimately were able to get to a place that made sense. And those deals have gone on and been just really strong performers for us. So I think the ability to see the specific, but then step out and make sure that it's a true fit and that the timing's right for us, it would be one thing that has improved over time. In terms of something that maybe has declined, I'm not sure how you phrased it, or maybe a place that I've become less flexible, let's say, would be a willingness to transact with individuals who are either not trustworthy or don't necessarily might be trustworthy, but don't have the capabilities to do the deal that they're looking at. I think early on in my career, I was willing to really go to battle and try to see if I could get something to work. And I think at one point, really early on, we had a portfolio signed up that was significantly larger than the portfolio we actually ultimately ended up transacting on because the buyer couldn't get their financing together. And I recognized that the time commitment for me, but also for me and our staff, was significant. And I'm less willing to risk that today. And so while I'm willing to enter into new relationships, find new people, I've become wiser about how to structure those deals to protect the interest and the time commitment that Apple and the people that I work with are committing to. Because if it doesn't work out, it's a lose situation where we push forward to try and do something, and our team is committed and has worked countless hours, and to not get it across the finish line, I feel a lot of pressure from that. I think today I've become wiser in how I structure those deals to ensure that we can get to the finish line.
You might view that as something that's declining. Others might see that as something that is an improvement because you are continuing to see, as you said, the big picture in other deals, but also looking at the big picture of how choosing deals that may not be the right deals can have a more lasting impact.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear a lot about is self-doubt. Imposter syndrome has certainly been a name that is attached to it, questioning confidence levels. I'm curious if, as you have come through the industry at various stages with different roles, different ways that you are trying to lead, if you ever experience forms of self-doubt, and if so, you either have strategies for overcoming that, or what would you recommend to other people who might be feeling a little bit challenged as they're trying to advance their career because they are getting bogged down by some self-doubt?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think all of us probably feel to varying degrees times of doubt, and specifically self doubt. I know for me personally, I can be my toughest critic. And part of that is because I'm striving to do and set goals that are high and difficult to achieve. And setting those goals not only for myself, but also for those that I work with. And if we fall short of that, that can be discouraging. And you can wonder whether or not you're doing it right. And so it can be deflating at times. I think it's important. So it's important to recognize that there are some benefits to self doubt, so long as they end up not being the loudest voice in your head. You can use a questioning mindset to analyze and to discover new paths that can improve processes or ways that you might approach your challenge in the future. For me, one non-work related example of this would be I compete in my spare time in a horse riding event. It's a Western horse riding event called cutting. And I compete against people who do this full time. It is literally their career, and they ride every day. They are training the horses that they're competing on and going to shows very regularly. And I don't have that time. I don't have that ability. And so I show a couple times a year, but I'm competing against those that are doing it all the time. And I found there was a point in time where I just felt like I wasn't making the finals, and I really wanted to be in the finals, but I recognized that was a group of 20 individuals out of 300 or 400 contestants. So it takes a lot to get there. And I just felt like there for a couple of years, I wasn't getting in the finals, and it was frustrating. And I started to think, am I capable? Is this something I'm doing? Am I able to compete against these people that do it all the time? And I turned that self-doubt into a positive, and I began to say, yes, I can, but I need to change some things. And some of those things involve my dedicated practice. So even though I can't ride every day, let's make the time that I do be purposeful. Let's focus on specific aspects of my riding and of my showing that I can improve so that it's intentional practice. I also began keeping a journal of my show experience so that 3, 4, 5 months down the road, when I showed again, I could look back and revisit what I had learned from the last show and build upon that so that I wouldn't have to learn those lessons again and again. And that time passed. I've made finals since. I've built confidence again around it. And I think we can utilize that self-doubt, so long as it's not the largest voice in our head, to make changes and to improve performance.
I didn't know that you were writing in that way and competitively. And it's an interesting lesson because you said a couple of things. Number one was changing the own narrative in our head. Can I? Yes, I can. But then the intentionality of putting in the work, really being self-aware enough to say, and being in control of what we can control. And so I think that's a very interesting thing to tie to leadership in the industry, is about how are you, if you think about our motto, empowering personal success. Are you?
My lights went off, sorry.
No, that's okay. You're good.
We're not moving enough.
Are we doing what we can to show up as our best selves in each of those different ways? As I mentioned at the start, we are running short on time. I want to click over to two other things. advice to our younger selves, which is my absolute favorite question to be asked and to ask, because I think we are all works in progress and reflection is a really big part of that. So as you look back on 21-year-old Nelson graduating from school, having had high school experiences, probably having an idea of what you were going to do long term, what would you tell that young man either about how things have turned out for you or maybe something you wish you knew then that would have made your path easier or different along the way?
I think I would tell my younger self to enjoy each phase of life a little bit
Mm,
more
I
than
love
I have. I think, and maybe some of your audience and does this as well, but I'm continually focused on the next phase of life, the next deal that we can do. And I recognize that in that mindset, I've missed a lot of amazing opportunities in my life. And yeah, I think it's important to look back and, or as I've looked back and recognized that, yeah, there's some things that I can change, but I really should enjoy and be comfortable where I am at. That doesn't mean not to work hard. It doesn't mean not to be engaged, but to trust the process and recognize that growth happens a little bit by a little bit, and that over the span of time, you're going to accomplish a lot of things. And so just enjoy the point in time that you're at.
Being present in the now. I really love that. As we wrap up, thinking about, I just mentioned our motto of empowering personal success. You've shared a lot of wonderful advice with us today. Any final thoughts on something you would tell one of our listeners as they are either deep into their leadership experience or looking at continuing to grow their leadership capabilities?
Yeah, I would say trust in yourself, believe in yourself, know that you can accomplish likely a lot more than you think you can. So set those goals, make them big goals, and then work really hard to achieve them.
I love that. Trust in yourself and set big goals and go after them. Nelson, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate all the times I get to share in the industry with you, your leadership within the industry, and really for sharing your journey with us today and some of the insights that you have had. For our audience, we know there's a lot of ways you can spend your day. We thank you for tuning in and hope you'll visit us at itspersonalstories.com to hear more from Nelson, but also the other industry leaders who have shared likewise their personal stories. Nelson, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rachel.